The transport ship landed on Kepler-4 for to be with a heavy thud that shook the entire mining facility. Dust clouds rose from the landing pad as the engines powered down with a deep rumble. Through the thick atmosphere, 3 suns cast strange shadows. Across the rocky surface of the planet, inside the facility, 12 different alien species waited in the main hall. This was supposed to be the most important meeting in galactic history. Karathi had invited everyone to discuss new trade, routes, and territory boundaries. Representatives from across the galaxy had come to this remote mining world for the first diplomatic summit, hosted by the newest member of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Kyung, stepped off the human transport first. He was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of serious face that made other diplomats take him seriously. Behind him came Dr. Jin, the chief scientist, carrying data tablets and looking nervous about the whole thing, followed all wearing their best formal uniforms. Then came Nari. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and bright eyes that seemed to notice everything around her. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit instead of a formal uniform. But what made everyone stop and stare was what walked beside her. The creature was massive. It stood almost 7 feet tall at the shoulder, with a body built like a wolf, but 3 times. Larger, its fur was silver gray, with streaks that looked almost metallic in the strange light of the 3 suns. Golden eyes scanned the room with an intelligence that made several aliens step back. When it opened its mouth slightly, rows of teeth became visible that could easily tear through steel. The beast walked calmly beside Nari, its massive paws making no sound on the metal floor. It stayed close to her side, but its head moved constantly, watching everything and everyone around them. The Karathi ambassador, Veltar, approached the human group. He was tall and covered in thick brown chitin that looked like natural armor. 4 arms extended from his body, and his face had the sharp features of a predator. Like all Karathi, he moved with the confidence of a warrior race that had never been defeated in battle. "Welcome to Kepler-4 for to be," Veltar said, his voice deep and rough. "We are honored to host this historic gathering." His eyes moved to the creature beside Nari. "Though I must ask about your companion. We were not informed that humans would bring animals to this meeting." Nari looked up at the Karathi ambassador without any sign of fear or embarrassment. "This is Tay," she said simply. "He is my brother." The silence that followed was complete. Every being in the room stopped what they were doing and turned to look at her. The Karathi delegation. Then the Zalarian representatives joined in with their high-pitched giggling sounds. Soon, nearly every alien in the room was laughing in their own way. Some made clicking sounds, others rumbled deep in their chests, and a few produced musical tones that somehow still sounded mocking. "Ambassador," Kyung's face turned red with embarrassment. "Nari," he said quietly, "please do not make jokes during diplomatic meetings." "I am not making a joke," Nari replied. She placed her hand on the creature's massive head. "Tay is my brother. He has been since we were children." Dr. Jin stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "Miss Nari, I think there has been a misunderstanding. This is obviously some kind of alien predator that you have been studying. Perhaps the isolation of your research has affected your judgment." The laughter grew louder. Veltar raised one of his 4 hands to get everyone's attention. "Humans," he said, "it seems your species has difficulty understanding basic concepts like family relationships. In civilized societies, we do not confuse animals with relatives." A delegate from the Therian Collective, a species that looked like walking crystals, made a sound like wind chimes. Through their translator, the words came out, "This explains much about human behavior. If they cannot tell the difference between family and pets, how can they understand complex trade agreements?" The creature called Tay remained perfectly still during all of this. His golden eyes watched each speaker carefully, but he made no aggressive moves. He simply stood beside Nari like a guardian. More comments came from around the room. The representative, whose blue skin and gills marked him as a Waterworld native, suggested that humans were obviously too primitive for galactic civilization. The insect-like hive mind delegate clicked and buzzed in a way that their translator rendered as contemptuous amusement. Ambassador Kyung pulled Nari aside, away from the main group. "What are you doing?" he whispered urgently. "This is the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. We cannot afford to look foolish in front of these species." I am not trying to look foolish, Nari said. I am telling the truth. Tay is my brother. That is impossible, Dr. Jin said, joining their quiet conversation. You are a human. That creature is clearly some kind of predatory alien species. They share no genetic markers, no common evolutionary history. The idea is completely absurd. From a scientific standpoint, Nari looked at both men with patient eyes. Science is not just about genetics and evolution. It is also about understanding and communication. Tay understands everything we are saying right now. He has human thoughts and human feelings. The only thing that has changed is his appearance. The other human diplomats gathered around them, all looking concerned and embarrassed. They had worked for months to prepare for this meeting. Humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council was still new and uncertain. They could not afford to appear backward or primitive. Nari Ambassador Kyung said carefully, I understand that you have spent a lot of time alone with this creature during your xenobiology research. Sometimes isolation can cause people to form unusual attachments to animals. This is not uncommon. But you must understand that claiming an alien predator is your brother makes our entire species look foolish. Around the main hall, the other delegates had returned to their conversations. But Nari could see them glancing in her direction and continuing to laugh. Some were clearly discussing humans in ways that were not complimentary. Veltar approached. Their group again, perhaps, he said with false kindness, the human delegation would prefer to keep their pet in the cargo bay during the actual negotiations. We would not want it to become frightened or aggressive during important discussions. Tay stays with me, Nari said firmly. He is part of the human delegation. The creature is not registered as a delegate, Veltar pointed out. Our security protocols require that all dangerous animals be properly contained. For the first time since arriving, Tay made a sound. It was low and quiet, barely audible, but somehow it made every being in the room turn to look at him. It was not exactly a growl, but it was not exactly anything else either. It sounded almost like a word, but in no language that the universal translators could identify. Nari reached up and touched Tay's massive shoulder. It is okay, she said softly. They do not understand yet. Understand what? Dr. Jin asked. That family is not about appearance, Nari replied. It is about loyalty, love, and never giving up on each other. Tay has been through things that would break most people. But he is still my brother, and I am still his sister. Ambassador Kyung looked around the room at all the alien species watching them with amusement and contempt. Nari, please, for the sake of human dignity, can you not simply call it your companion animal or research subject? No, Nari said. I will not lie about who Tay is. He deserves better than that. The laughter had mostly died down, but the atmosphere in the room remained, tense and mocking. The humans were clearly seen as a curiosity rather than serious diplomatic partners. As the day wore on and the formal sessions began, Nari and Tay took seats at the back of the human delegation area. Up considerable space, but remaining completely quiet and still. But his golden eyes never stopped watching. And sometimes, when Nari whispered something to him, his massive head would turn slightly in what looked very much like a nod. The first day of negotiations began at dawn, when the three sons of Kepler 442b cast their strange light through the tall windows of the conference hall. Representatives from 12 species sat around a massive circular table made of polished black stone. Each delegation had their own section with chairs suited to their unique body shapes. The Korathi dominated the discussions from the very beginning. Veltar stood at the center of the table, his forearms gesturing as he spoke about territorial claims and mining rights. His voice filled the room with authority that made other species listen carefully to every word. The Outer Rim sectors have been unclaimed for too long, Veltar declared. The Korathi Empire requires these systems for our expansion. We have the military strength to protect them and the technology to make them productive. The Aquarian delegate raised his webbed hand. Those sectors contain water worlds that my people have been studying for decades. We have scientific claims that should be respected. Veltar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Scientific claims mean nothing without the power to enforce them. The Korathi do not recognize research as ownership. Around the table tensions began to rise. The crystal-like Therian collective representative chimed in with concerns about mineral rights. The insect hive mind delegation buzzed angrily about trade route disruptions. Each species seemed to have conflicting interests that would be impossible to resolve peacefully. Through all of this, the human delegation sat quietly in their assigned section. Ambassador Kyung tried to take notes and look diplomatic, but it was clear that humans were not being included in the major discussions. When he tried to speak about human colony worlds, the other species barely acknowledged him. At the back of the human section, Nari sat with Tay lying beside her chair. The massive creature remained perfectly still, but his golden eyes followed every speaker around the table. Sometimes his ears would twitch slightly when certain delegates spoke, as if he was listening more carefully than anyone else in the room. During the first break, several alien delegates gathered near the refreshment area. Their conversations were loud enough for everyone to hear, and the universal translators made sure nothing was lost. "The humans are even stranger than we expected," said the Zellerian representative, his purple skin shifting colors as he spoke. "Did you see the female who thinks that Predator is her family member?" The Therian delegate made crystalline ringing sounds. "It shows how primitive they really are. Any species that cannot distinguish between animals and relatives is not ready for galactic civilization." An insect delegate from the hive mind clicked rapidly. "Our analysis suggests humans form emotional attachments to anything that shows them attention. It is a weakness that makes them unreliable partners." Veltar joined the group, his heavy footsteps making the floor vibrate slightly. "The human delegation embarrasses itself with such displays. How can we trust them with important trade agreements when they bring dangerous animals to diplomatic meetings?" The comments continued throughout the day. Every time there was a break, the alien delegates would gather and discuss the humans with barely concealed amusement. They called Nari the beast speaker and made jokes about human intelligence and judgment. The worst part was that the other humans began to distance themselves from Nari as well. During lunch, Ambassador Kyung moved to a table far from where she sat with Tay. Dr. Jin avoided making eye contact with her. The other diplomats whispered among themselves and shook their heads when they looked in her direction. By afternoon, the negotiations had grown more heated. The Karathi were demanding larger and larger territorial concessions from other species. When smaller delegations tried to object, Veltar would remind them of Karathi military superiority. "Strength determines rights in the galaxy," he said during one particularly tense exchange. "Species that cannot defend their claims should not make them." The Aquarian delegate tried to protest. The Galactic Council was formed to prevent exactly this kind of thinking. "We are supposed to resolve conflicts through discussion and compromise." "The Council recognizes reality," Veltar replied, "and the reality is that some species are stronger than others. The weak serve the strong, or they find themselves replaced by more capable civilizations." Several smaller delegations looked uncomfortable with this statement, but none of them challenged it directly. The Karathi reputation as warriors was well known throughout the galaxy. During another break, Dr. Jin finally approached Nari. He sat down across from her while keeping a nervous eye on Tay, who was resting with his massive head on his paws. "Nari," Dr. Jin said quietly, "we need to talk about your situation here." "What situation?" Nari asked, though she clearly knew what he meant. "This creature you brought with you. The other delegates are using it to question human competence. Some of them are suggesting that our species is too unstable for full council membership." Nari looked at her colleague with patient eyes. "What they think about Tay does not change who he is, but it changes how they see all of us," Dr. Jin insisted. "You are a xenobiologist. You understand animal behavior. Surely you can see that your attachment to this predator is affecting your judgment." "My judgment is fine," Nari said. "It is their understanding that is limited." Dr. Jin leaned forward, lowering his voice even more. "Then explain it to me. Make me understand how you can claim that creature is your brother." Nari was quiet for a long moment, watching Tay's steady breathing. "Do you remember the Enhanced Human Project from 5 years ago? The military experiment?" Dr. Jin frowned. "That was classified at the highest levels. How do you know about it?" "Because my brother volunteered for it." The words hung in the air between them. Dr. Jin stared at her with growing confusion and concern. "That project was cancelled," he said slowly. "All the volunteers were declared lost in training accidents." "They were not lost," Nari said. "They were changed." The genetic modifications worked, but not in the way the scientists expected. The volunteers kept their human minds and memories, but their bodies were transformed to survive in hostile environments. Dr. Jin looked at Tay with new eyes, trying to see something human in the massive predatory form. That is impossible. Even if such modifications were attempted, the psychological trauma would drive anyone insane. Most of them did not survive the process, Nari admitted, but Tay did. He kept his mind, his personality, his memories of our childhood together. Only thing that changed was his appearance. You were telling me that creature has the mind of your brother. I am telling you that creature is my brother. He remembers teaching me to ride a bicycle. He remembers our mother's birthday songs. He remembers the promise we made to always look out for each other. Dr. Jin shook his head. Even if what you are saying is true, how can you communicate with him? He cannot speak. He can communicate, Nari said. You just have to know how to listen. As if responding to his name, Tay lifted his massive head and looked directly at Dr. Jin. For a moment, the scientist found himself staring into those golden eyes, and something in them seemed almost familiar, almost human. Then Tay made a soft sound, barely audible, but clearly directed at Nari. She nodded as if he had spoken actual words. What did he say? Dr. Jin asked, despite himself. He said, "You smell nervous," Nari replied, "and he wants to know if you are afraid of him." Dr. Jin sat back in his chair, studying both Nari and Tay carefully. This is all very difficult to believe. I know, Nari said, but believing something and understanding it are two different things. I spent 2 years learning to communicate with Tay after his transformation. It was not easy, but family is worth the effort. Around them, the other delegates were returning to their seats for the afternoon session. The conversations about human incompetence continued, and the looks of amusement and contempt remained fixed on their faces. But Dr. Jin continued to watch Tay throughout the rest of the day, and slowly, he began to notice things that others missed. The way the creature's attention focused when certain topics were discussed, the subtle changes in his posture when threats were mentioned, the careful way he positioned himself to protect not just Nari, but the entire human delegation. By evening, Dr. Jin was no longer certain about anything he thought he knew about the situation, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a troubling question began to form. If Nari was telling the truth about her brother, what else might the humans not know about their own capabilities? The second day began differently than the first. When the delegates arrived at the conference hall, they found armed Karathi guards stationed at every entrance. The weapons were clearly visible, and the guards made no effort to hide their threatening presence. Ambassador Kyung approached Veltar during the morning preparation time. I was not aware that weapons would be present during our diplomatic meetings, he said carefully. Veltar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Security has become necessary, he replied. There are dangerous predators on this world. We must protect our honored guests. The explanation seemed reasonable enough, but something about the way Veltar spoke made several delegates feel uneasy. The Aquarian representative noticed that all the exits were now blocked by armed guards. The Therian delegate observed that the weapons were pointed inward, toward the conference table, rather than outward, toward potential external threats as the morning session began. Veltar stood at the center of the room with a confidence that seemed different from the day before. His forearms spread wide as he addressed the gathered delegates. Yesterday, we discussed territories and trade routes, he said, his voice carrying easily through the large hall. Today, we will discuss the future of galactic civilization itself. The other delegates exchanged glances. This was not on the planned agenda for the summit. The galaxy has become crowded with too many species, Veltar continued. Resources are limited, space is finite. The time has come to determine which civilizations deserve to continue and which have outlived their usefulness. A cold silence fell over the room. The Zalarian delegate was the first to speak. What exactly are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything, Veltar replied. I am explaining reality. The Karathi Empire has grown beyond the need for weak partners and inefficient allies. This summit was designed to gather potential rivals in one location for easy elimination. The words hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Around the room, more Karathi warriors emerged from hidden positions behind wall panels and concealed doorways. Each one carried advanced plasma weapons that could cut through most known armor types. "This is an outrage," shouted the Aquarian delegate, rising from his seat. "The Galactic Council will never accept such actions. The Galactic Council will accept whatever the strongest species decides," Veltar said calmly. "And after today, that will be the Korathi alone." Ambassador Kyung stood up slowly, his diplomatic training taking over despite the shock of the situation. "Surely we can discuss this rationally. There must be room for negotiation and compromise." Veltar looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Humans," he said, "always believing that words can solve problems that require action. Your weakness is exactly why your species was selected for early termination." The Korathi warriors began moving into formation around the conference table. Their weapons were now openly trained on the delegates, making it clear that this was no longer a diplomatic meeting, but a carefully planned execution. "How long have you been planning this?" asked the Therian delegate, their crystalline voice ringing with fear and anger. "Since the moment we joined your precious council," Vel admitted. "It was surprisingly easy to convince you all to come to this remote location. A few promises of trade agreements and territorial discussions, and you walked directly into our trap." The mining facility around them suddenly made more sense. It was not just a meeting location, it was a prison. The thick walls would contain any attempted communications with the outside galaxy. The remote location meant no rescue would arrive in time. The multiple levels and corridors would prevent any organized escape attempt. Dr. Jin looked around the room, quickly calculating their chances. 12 delegations, with a total of maybe 40 individuals, mostly diplomats and scientists with no combat training. Against them were at least 30 Korathi warriors, all armed and clearly experienced in battle. "You cannot simply murder diplomatic delegations," the Hivemind representative buzzed frantically. "Our species will demand answers. They will send rescue missions." "They will send nothing," Veltar said. "By the time your absence is noticed, Korathi fleets will already be moving against your home worlds. This facility will be destroyed, and the official record will show that a tragic mining accident claimed all the summit delegates. Very sad, but these things happen on dangerous frontier worlds." The trap was perfect in its simplicity. Every major species in the galaxy had sent their best diplomatic minds to this meeting. With them gone, the remaining governments would be thrown into chaos, just as Korathi military forces launched their coordinated attacks. Around the conference table, panic began to spread. Some delegates tried to activate emergency communicators, only to discover that all signals were being jammed. Others looked for escape routes, but every exit was blocked by armed guards. In the back of the human section, Nari remained perfectly calm. She sat quietly, with her hand resting on Tay's massive head, watching the situation develop with careful eyes, while other delegates shouted and argued. She seemed to be listening to something that no one else could hear. Tay himself appeared unchanged from the previous day. He lay beside Neris's chair with his head on his paws, looking like nothing more than a large, lazy predator. But those who watched carefully might have noticed that his golden eyes were now tracking every Korathi warrior in the room, memorizing their positions and weapon types. "The executions will begin with the species that pose the greatest long-term threat," Veltar announced. "Humans first, I think. Your adaptability makes you unpredictable, and unpredictable enemies are the most dangerous kind." A Korathi commander approached the human delegation, his plasma rifle aimed directly at Ambassador Kyung. "Stand up," he ordered, "all of you." The human diplomats rose slowly from their seats, their faces pale with fear and shock. Dr. Jin tried to position himself between the weapon and the younger members of their delegation. Ambassador Kyung maintained his diplomatic composure, but his hands were shaking slightly. "This is murder," Kyung said quietly. "History will remember what you have done here." "History is written by survivors," the Korathi commander replied, "and there will be no survivors from this meeting except Korathi." The commander raised his weapon, preparing to fire. Around the room, other Korathi warriors took aim at the remaining delegates. In seconds, the slaughter would begin. That was when Nari finally spoke. "Tay," she said softly, her voice carrying clearly through the tense silence. "I think it is time, for the first time since arriving on Kepler 44 to be." The massive creature beside her moved. It was not a sudden movement, but it was unmistakably purposeful. Tay lifted his head and looked directly at the Korathi commander, threatening the human delegation, and then he growled. It was not the sound of an animal. It was low and deep, and somehow intelligent, carrying within it a promise of violence that made every being in the room freeze in place. The sound seemed to come from somewhere deeper than Tay's throat, as if it originated in his very soul. The Korathi commander hesitated, his weapon wavering slightly as he stared at the golden eyes that were now fixed on him with complete attention. "What is that thing?" he asked, his voice not quite as confident as before. Nari stood up slowly, her hand never leaving Tay's head. "That," she said calmly, "is my brother, and he does not like bullies." The room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The Korathi warriors maintained their positions, but several of them were now watching the massive creature. With growing unease, Veltar stepped forward, his forearms gesturing dismissively. "Enough of this foolishness. Kill the humans now, starting with the female and her pet." The commander turned his weapon toward Nari, his finger moving toward the trigger. But before he could fire, Tay rose to his full height beside her. Standing up, the creature was even more impressive than when lying down. His shoulders reached nearly to Nara's chest, and his massive frame suggested power that went far beyond anything the delegates had imagined. The silver-gray fur along his back seemed to shimmer with an energy that had nothing to do with the lighting in the room. "Last warning," the Korathi commander said, trying to sound threatening despite the obvious nervousness in his voice. "Move! Away from the animal, or we will kill you both together." Nari looked at him with the same patient expression she had worn throughout the entire summit. "My brother has been very polite during these meetings," she said. "He has remained quiet, and still, even when people said cruel things about him. But now you are threatening his family, and that is something he cannot allow." The commander's finger tightened on the trigger. Around the room, 30 Korathi warriors prepared to end the lives of 40 helpless delegates. None of them were prepared for what happened next. The Korathi commander's finger was halfway to the trigger when Tay moved. What happened next was impossible for most beings in the room to follow with their eyes. One moment, the massive creature was standing calmly beside Nari. The next moment, he was airborne, crossing the 15 feet between them and the commander in a single leap that defied every law of physics the delegates thought they understood. The commander's plasma rifle fired, but the beam passed harmlessly through empty air. Tay had already moved past where the weapon was aimed, his body twisting in mid-flight with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. The impact when Tay struck the Korathi warrior was like thunder. The commander flew backward across the room, his armor cracking from the force of the blow. His weapon spun away, clattering uselessly across the metal floor. But this was not the mindless attack of an enraged animal. Even as Tay landed from his leap, he was already moving toward the next threat. His massive paws found perfect grip on the smooth floor, and his golden eyes tracked 3 more Korathi warriors who were trying to bring their weapons to bear. The second warrior managed to fire one shot before Tay reached him. The plasma beam scorched the fur along Tay's shoulder, but the creature did not even slow down. His massive jaws clamped down on the warrior's weapon, crushing the advanced technology like it was made of paper. Then a casual swipe of his paw sent the Korathi spinning into a wall with enough force to crack the metal panels. The third and fourth warriors tried to coordinate their attack, firing from different angles to catch Tay in a crossfire. But the creature seemed to know where each shot would be before the triggers were pulled. He dropped low, letting the beams pass over his head, then sprang forward in a rolling motion that brought him within striking distance of both enemies. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Tay moved through the Korathi warriors like they were standing still. His enhanced reflexes let him dodge plasma beams that should have been impossible to avoid. His strength allowed him to tear through their advanced armor, as if it were cloth. His speed made it impossible for them to track his movements long enough to aim properly. But the most terrifying thing for the watching delegates was the intelligence behind every move. This was not random violence or animal instinct. Every attack was precise, calculated, designed to disable rather than kill. Tay was not trying to slaughter his enemies. He was trying to neutralize them as efficiently as possible. Within 30 seconds, 8 Korathi warriors were down. None of them were dead, But all of them were too injured to continue fighting. Their weapons were destroyed, their armor was shredded, and several had obvious broken bones that would take weeks to heal, even with advanced medical treatment. The remaining Karathi warriors began to back away from the creature, shattered by what they had just witnessed. These were veteran soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds, but none of them had ever faced anything like Veltar. Himself stepped forward, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of command. "What are you waiting for?" he shouted at his remaining warriors. "It is just one animal. Kill it." But even as he spoke, Veltar's voice carried a note of uncertainty that had not been there before. The easy confidence of the predator species was beginning to crack as they realized they might have misjudged their prey. Tay turned his attention to the Karathi ambassador, his golden eyes locking onto the alien leader with unmistakable intelligence. For a long moment, the two beings stared at each other across the chaos of the conference room. Then Tay did something that made every delegate in the room question everything they thought they knew about the nature of intelligence and communication. He spoke. The words were rough and distorted, filtered through a throat and vocal cords that were not designed for human speech. But they were unmistakably words, spoken in perfect Korean with an accent that Nari recognized from their childhood. "You should not have threatened my sister," Tay said, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence of the room. Of those words was greater than any physical blow he had delivered. Every being in the conference hall suddenly understood that they were not looking at a trained animal or a clever pet. They were looking at a person, a human being who had been transformed, but who retained every aspect of his original personality. And intelligence. Dr. Jin staggered backward, his scientific worldview crumbling as he realized that everything Nari had told him was true. Ambassador Kyung stared at Tay with new understanding, finally grasping the magnitude of what human science had achieved and the cost that achievement had demanded. The alien delegates were even more shocked. Species that had spent 2 days mocking human intelligence and calling them primitive were suddenly faced with evidence of technology and sacrifice that went far beyond anything they had imagined possible. Veltar recovered first, his warrior instincts overriding his surprise. "Impossible," he snarled. "No species can survive that kind of genetic modification. The mind breaks under such stress. The minds of weak species break," Tay replied, taking a step toward the Korathi leader. "Human minds are stronger than you understand." Around the room, the remaining Karathi warriors were still trying to process what they had heard. Several of them lowered their weapons involuntarily, no longer certain that they were facing an animal that could be hunted. But Veltar was not finished. His forearms reached 4 backup weapons concealed in his armor, drawing smaller but still deadly plasma pistols. "Enhanced or not, you are still just one creature against 20 warriors. Even if you kill me, my soldiers will slaughter everyone. In this room, I am not alone," Tay said simply. At those words, something changed in the shadows around the conference hall. Movement became visible in places where there had been none before. Shapes that had seemed like equipment or architectural features suddenly revealed themselves to be living beings. For more creatures like Tay emerged from their hiding places. Each one was slightly different in size and coloring, but all shared the same enhanced physique and intelligent golden eyes. They moved with the same impossible grace and speed that Tay had demonstrated, positioning themselves strategically around the room. "Brothers," Tay said in Korean, his voice carrying warmth and affection that no animal could fake. "It is time to protect our family." The response came in a harmony of voices, all speaking the same language, all carrying the same determination. "It is time," Brother Nari stepped forward, placing her hand on Tay's massive shoulder. "Everyone," she said, addressing the terrified delegates, "I would like you to meet the rest of my family. These are the volunteers from the Enhanced Human Project. They have been protecting our species from threats too dangerous for normal humans to face." She gestured to each of the creatures in turn. "That is June, who specializes in stealth and reconnaissance. The large one by the door is Min, our heavy combat specialist. The one near the emergency exit is Soon, our demolitions expert. And the one watching the ventilation shafts is Young, our tech specialist." Each creature nodded as they were introduced, their golden eyes reflecting not just intelligence, but personality. These were not copies or clones. They were individuals who had chosen to sacrifice their human appearance to gain the power necessary to protect others. Veltar looked around the room, realizing that his perfectly planned ambush had become a trap for his own forces. "How long have they been here?" he demanded. "Since before your ship landed," Nari replied. "They have been watching and waiting, making sure that no harm came to the innocent beings you invited to this meeting." The Korathi leader's mandibles clicked in frustration and growing fear. His warriors were outnumbered by creatures whose capabilities they could not fully understand. Worse, these enhanced humans had heard every word of his plan and had allowed it to proceed just far enough to expose the full scope of Korathi treachery. "You cannot stop us all," Veltar said, but his voice no longer carried the confidence it had held moments before. "The Korathi Empire has fleets throughout the galaxy. Even if you survive here, your homeworlds will still burn." Tay exchanged glances with his brothers, and something that might have been amusement passed between them. "We know about your fleets," he said. "That is why we are here. This meeting was not just about protecting these delegates. It was about stopping your empire before it could begin its war." Young, the tech specialist, made a sound that was almost like laughter. "Your communication systems have been compromised for weeks," he said in accented but clear Standard Galactic. "Every order, every battle plan, every fleet movement has been monitored and reported to the appropriate authorities. The Galactic Council fleet is already moving to intercept your ships," added Min, his deeper voice rumbling through the room. "By now, your commanders are discovering that their surprise attack has become a surrender negotiation." The color drained from Veltar's face as he realized the full scope of what had happened. The Korathi had not just failed to eliminate their rivals, they had exposed their entire military strategy and lost the element of surprise that their plan had depended upon. But Veltar was still a warrior, and warriors do not surrender easily. With a roar of rage and desperation, he raised his weapons and charged directly at Nari, hoping to at least eliminate the human who had somehow orchestrated his defeat. He never reached her. Tay intercepted the Korathi leader in mid-charge, his enhanced speed allowing him to position himself between Veltar and his sister without apparent effort. The collision between the two leaders was brief, but decisive. When it was over, Veltar lay unconscious on the floor, his weapons scattered and his armor cracked. Tay stood over him, not even breathing hard from the exertion. "Is everyone all right?" Nari asked, looking around the room at the shaken but unharmed delegates. The silence that followed was not the silence of fear or mockery that had filled the room for the past 2 days. It was the silence of awe and respect from beings who had finally understood what they were truly witnessing. The humans had not just survived the Korathi trap, they had turned it into a rescue mission that saved every species represented at the summit. The aftermath of the battle was filled with a strange quiet around the conference hall. Unconscious Korathi warriors lay scattered like broken toys. Their advanced weapons were destroyed, their armor was shredded, and their confidence was completely shattered. The alien delegates stood in small groups, staring at the 5 enhanced humans with expressions that ranged from wonder to terror. Everything they thought they knew about humanity had been turned upside down in the space of a few minutes. Dr. Jin approached Tay slowly, his scientific mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. "The genetic modifications," he said quietly. "How extensive were they? How did you retain your consciousness through such radical physical changes?" Tay turned his golden eyes toward the human scientist, and when he spoke, his voice carried the patience of someone who had answered such questions many times before. "The process was not easy," he said, his words still rough but clearly understandable. "Many volunteers did not survive. Others survived the physical changes but lost their minds to the trauma. We 5 were the only ones who came through with our personalities intact." "But why?" Dr. Jin asked. "Why volunteer for something so dangerous and irreversible?" Young, the tech specialist, moved closer to join the conversation. His enhanced form was leaner than Tay's, built for speed and agility rather than raw power. "Because someone had to," he said simply. "Human space was expanding, but so were the threats we faced. Normal humans could not survive on the most dangerous frontier worlds or fight the most deadly predators." Min, the heavy combat specialist, nodded his massive head in agreement. "We volunteered to become what humanity needed us to become. It was our choice, and we have never regretted it." Ambassador Kyung listened to this exchange with growing understanding. How many missions have you completed? How long have you been protecting human interests without anyone knowing? 5 years? Soon, the demolitions expert replied, 17 major operations. We have eliminated threats that would have destroyed entire colonies. We have gathered intelligence that prevented 3 separate wars. We have rescued hostages from situations too dangerous for normal military forces. June, the stealth specialist, emerged from the shadows where he had been checking the unconscious Karathi warriors. Most of our work happens in places where no witnesses survive to report it. This is the first time we have operated in front of civilians. The Aquarian delegate, his blue skin still pale from shock, approached the group hesitantly. You have been operating in secret for 5 years. Why did the human government not announce your existence to the galaxy? Nari answered for her brothers. Because the galaxy was not ready to understand what they represent. Today proves that. 2 days ago, you laughed at the idea that Tay could be my brother. You called us primitive for claiming that family bonds could transcend physical appearance. The Therian delegate's crystalline form chimed softly with what might have been embarrassment. We were wrong. We judged based on appearance rather than truth. Most species do, Tay said without bitterness. It is natural to fear what seems different or dangerous. Around the room, the other delegates began to approach the enhanced humans with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The Zalarian representative was the first to speak directly to one of them. Your sacrifice, he said to Min, giving up your original form to gain the power to protect others, this is something my people would consider the highest honor possible. Min's massive head tilted slightly in acknowledgement. We did not do it for honor. We did it for love. Love of our families, love of our species, love of the innocent beings throughout the galaxy who deserve to live in peace. The hive mind delegate, their insect-like form clicking with rapid calculations, addressed Young directly. Your technical modifications. How did you manage to interface organic neural tissue with quantum processing systems? Young's response was detailed and scientific, but what impressed the delegate most was the obvious intelligence behind the explanation. This was not just an enhanced warrior. This was a brilliant scientist who happened to possess physical capabilities beyond anything previously imagined. As the conversations continued, a remarkable transformation took place in the conference hall. The same delegates who had spent 2 days mocking human intelligence were now hanging on every word spoken by the enhanced humans. They asked questions about philosophy, science, military strategy, and technological development. The enhanced humans answered every question with patience and wisdom that reflected their years of experience in the most dangerous regions of known space. They spoke about the moral challenges of their existence, the loneliness of being forever changed from their original forms, and the satisfaction of knowing that their sacrifice had meaning. Dr. Jin found himself in deep conversation with all 5 of them, his scientific excitement barely contained. The potential applications are incredible, he said. Enhanced humans could survive in environments that would kill any other known species. You could explore regions of space that are completely inaccessible to normal life forms. We have, June said quietly, that is how we discovered the Karathi plan. We infiltrated their most secure facilities, gathered intelligence from their home worlds, and monitored their fleet movements from locations where no normal spy could survive. Ambassador Kyung looked around the room at the disabled Karathi warriors and the odd expressions of the alien delegates. What happens now? The Karathi Empire's conspiracy has been exposed, but there will be political consequences throughout the galaxy. Soon, who had been monitoring communications equipment that none of the delegates had noticed, looked up from his work. The Galactic Council fleets have successfully intercepted the Karathi attack forces. Most of their ships surrendered when they realized their battle plans had been compromised. The few that attempted to fight were quickly overwhelmed. The Karathi government is requesting emergency negotiations to avoid complete military defeat, Young added, his enhanced senses allowing him to process multiple data streams simultaneously. They are offering to surrender their territorial claims and accept council oversight of their military forces. Veltar, who had regained consciousness but remained bound by restraints that Young had somehow produced, spoke from his position on the floor. You think this changes anything? The galaxy will always belong to the strong. Today you were stronger, but tomorrow will bring new challenges. Tay approached the Korathi leader, his golden eyes reflecting something that might have been pity. You still do not understand. Strength is not about physical power or military might. Strength is about the willingness to sacrifice for others, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to choose love over fear. Pretty words, Vel snarled. But they will not save you when the next threat emerges. No, Nari said, joining her brother beside the fallen Korathi leader. But we will. That is what family does. We protect each other no matter what form that protection needs to take. She looked around the room at the assembled delegates, her expression serious but hopeful. Today, you have seen what humans are willing to become when the galaxy needs protection. My brothers gave up their original forms, but they gained something more valuable: the power to ensure that beings like you can continue to exist in peace. The Aquarian delegate stepped forward, his voice filled with genuine respect. On behalf of my people, I want to thank you for what you have done. Not just today, but for the 5 years you have been protecting us without our knowledge. Similar statements came from around the room, as each delegation expressed their gratitude and newfound respect for humanity's sacrifice. The species that had arrived on Kepler 442b, with contempt for human intelligence, were leaving with an understanding that humans possessed something far more valuable than conventional wisdom. As the day ended and preparations began for the delegates' departure, Dr. Jin made a request that surprised everyone. I want to recommend that the Enhanced Human Project be declassified and expanded, he told Ambassador Kyung, not to create more warriors, but to ensure that beings like Tay and his brothers receive the recognition and support they deserve. The galaxy needs to know, Ambassador Kyung agreed. Not just about their capabilities, but about their sacrifice and their continued dedication to protecting others. Tay shook his massive head. Recognition is not necessary. We chose this path. Knowing that most people would never understand or accept what we became, we found our reward in Naris love and in the knowledge that our actions make a difference. But acceptance is necessary, Nara said firmly. You and your brothers deserve to be welcomed home, not hidden away like shameful secrets. The galaxy has seen today what true strength looks like. It is time for humanity to embrace that truth as well. As the enhanced humans prepared to fade back into the shadows from which they had emerged, the delegates gathered around them for final conversations. These were no longer the mocking discussions of primitive humans and their pets, but serious exchanges between equals who had gained profound respect for each other. The transformation in attitudes was complete, but more importantly, the galaxy had gained protectors whose dedication went far beyond duty or honor, protectors motivated by the strongest force in the universe: family love that transcends all boundaries. 3 days later, the transport ships gathered around Kepler 4 for to be as the delegates prepared to return to their home worlds. The mining facility that had been intended as a death trap was now buzzing with activity as representatives from 12 species worked together to document what had happened and planned for the future. The Korathi warriors had been transferred to Galactic Council custody, and Veltar himself was awaiting trial for crimes against galactic peace. The Korathi Empire's military forces had been placed under Council supervision, and their government was desperately trying to negotiate terms that would allow their species to remain part of galactic civilization, but the real changes were happening in smaller, more personal conversations throughout the facility. Dr. Jin stood in the main laboratory with all 5 enhanced humans, recording detailed interviews about their experiences and capabilities. What had begun as scientific curiosity had become something much deeper, a genuine effort to understand and document the sacrifice these individuals had made for the greater good. The physical modifications are remarkable, Dr. Jin said, reviewing his data, but the psychological resilience is even more impressive. Most beings would have lost their sanity during such radical transformation. We had something to hold on to, Young explained, his technical knowledge making him the best spokesperson for the scientific aspects of their condition. Our memories of family, our sense of purpose, and our connection to each other. Those bonds gave us anchors when everything else about our existence was changing. Min nodded his massive head in agreement. The hardest part was not the physical pain or the fear of dying. It was the thought that we might lose ourselves and forget why we had volunteered in the first place. But you never forgot, Dr. Jin observed. After 5 years and 17 dangerous missions, you still remember your original motivations and personalities. Because Noreen never let us forget, Tay said simply. She visited each of us during our recovery. She learned to communicate with us when we could no longer speak as we once did. She reminded us that being human is not about how you look, it is about how you choose to live. In another part of the facility, Ambassador Kyung was engaged in intense discussions with representatives from the Galactic Council. The revelation of the Enhanced Human Project had sent shockwaves through galactic politics, but not in the way anyone had expected. The other species are not afraid of your enhanced humans, Council Representative Zenth explained. They are impressed by them. Every delegation that attended this summit has returned home with reports of human sacrifice and dedication that go far beyond anything previously imagined. What are the political implications? Ambassador Kyung asked. Humanity's status in the Council is being elevated, Zenth replied. Your species has demonstrated capabilities and moral character that place you among the most respected civilizations. In the galaxy, several species are requesting formal alliance treaties, and others are asking for human assistance with their own security challenges. Ambassador Kyung considered this information carefully. And what about the enhanced humans themselves? Will they be accepted by galactic society? That, said Zenth, will depend largely on how humanity chooses to present them to the galaxy. Meanwhile, in the conference hall where the crisis had begun, Nari sat with her 5 brothers as they planned for an uncertain future. The question of what came next was complicated by years of secrecy and the sudden exposure of their existence. The Council wants to offer us official positions as galactic peacekeepers, June reported. We would have full diplomatic immunity and the authority to operate in any Council territory. But that would mean leaving Earth permanently, Soon pointed out. Once we become public figures, we can never return to operating in secret. Maybe it is time to stop hiding, Tay said thoughtfully. We chose this path to protect innocent beings. Throughout the galaxy, if we can do more good as known protectors than as hidden guardians, perhaps we should accept the change. Nari listened to her brothers discuss their options, proud of how they approached even this decision with the same careful consideration they brought to every mission. Whatever you choose, she said, you will always have my support. You gave up your original forms to become what the galaxy needed. Now the galaxy is ready to accept you for what you are. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of delegates from several different species. Over the past 3 days, these same beings had transformed from mockers to admirers, seeking out opportunities to speak with the enhanced humans and learn from their experiences. The Aquarian delegate approached Tay directly. My government has authorized me to make a formal request, he said. Our deep ocean worlds are being threatened by creatures that our current technology cannot handle. We would be honored if you and your brothers would consider assisting us. Similar requests came from other species. The Therian Collective needed help exploring regions of space where crystalline life forms could not survive. The Zolarians requested assistance with a piracy problem that their security forces could not resolve. Even species that had not attended the summit were sending messages asking for human help with challenges that seemed impossible to solve through conventional means. It seems, Min observed with something that might have been amusement, that the galaxy has decided we are useful after all. More than useful, the Hivemind delegate added. You represent something that we thought was impossible. The willing sacrifice of individual identity for the greater good of all life. This is a concept that resonates deeply with species throughout the galaxy. As the day progressed, formal ceremonies began to recognize the events that had taken place on Kepler-4, for it to be. The Galactic Council had sent an official representative to present commendations to both the enhanced humans and the regular human delegation. But the most meaningful moment came when Ambassador Kyung stood before the assembled delegates and made an announcement that had been 5 years in the making. Today, on behalf of the human government and people, I formally recognize the service and sacrifice of the Enhanced Human Project volunteers, he said, his voice carrying throughout the hall. Tay, June, Min, Soon, and Young are hereby granted full citizenship rights, military honors, and the gratitude of our entire species. Furthermore, he continued, these individuals will be offered positions as official human representatives to the Galactic Council. with full diplomatic status and the authority to act on behalf of humanity in matters of galactic security. The response from the alien delegates was immediate and unanimous, a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. Beings who had laughed at the idea of the enhanced humans being part of a family were now acknowledging them as heroes worthy of the highest honors, but the most important response came from Tay himself. For the first time since his transformation, he stood at his full height before a formal gathering and spoke as a representative of his species. "We accept these honors, not for ourselves, but for all the beings throughout the galaxy who have sacrificed to protect others," he said, his rough voice carrying clearly through the hall. "We are proud to serve, and we are grateful to be accepted not despite our differences, but because of the strength those differences represent." As the ceremonies continued, Nari found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, her brothers had been hidden secrets, considered lost to science, and forgotten by society. Today, they were recognized as heroes and offered positions of honor within galactic civilization. The transformation was complete. But it was not just the enhanced humans who had changed. The entire galaxy had been forced to reconsider its assumptions about strength, family, and the nature of sacrifice. As the transport ships prepared for departure, each carrying delegates who would return home with new respect for humanity and new understanding of what true strength meant. Nari stood with her brothers, looking out at the stars. "What happens now?" she asked. Tay was quiet for a moment, his golden eyes reflecting the light of the 3 suns. When he finally spoke, his words carried the wisdom of someone who had learned that the most important victories are often the ones that change hearts, rather than defeat enemies. "Now we continue to protect the family," he said. "But the family has grown larger than we ever imagined. It includes every being in the galaxy who chooses love over fear, cooperation over domination, and sacrifice over selfishness. The galaxy laughed when you claimed I was your brother," he continued, looking at Nari with affection that transcended his transformed appearance. "Now they understand that brotherhood is not about blood or species or physical form. It is about the choice to stand together against whatever threatens the things we love." Young approached them, carrying a communication device that was receiving messages from across the galaxy. "We have 17 new requests for assistance," he reported. "Pirates, predators, natural disasters, and political crises. The galaxy has decided it needs us." "Then we go where we are needed," Min said simply. "As we always have," Sue nodded in agreement. "But this time we go as recognized protectors rather than hidden guardians. The secrecy is over." June emerged from the shadows one last time, but his next emergence would be into the light of public service rather than covert operations. "Are we ready for that change?" he asked. Nari looked around at her 5 brothers, beings who had sacrificed everything to become what the galaxy needed them to be, and who had finally received the recognition and acceptance they deserved. "We are ready," she said with certainty. "We have always been a family. Now the galaxy knows it too." As their ship departed Kepler-4 for to be heading toward their first official mission as recognized protectors of galactic peace, the words that had started their journey echoed through the cosmos with new meaning. She had claimed the beast was her brother. They had all laughed. But now they understood that some truths are too important to be diminished by laughter, and some bonds are too strong to be broken by transformation. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their adaptability, but their refusal to abandon anyone who chose to stand with them in defense of life, peace, and the hope for a better tomorrow. And in the end, that lesson was worth more than any military victory or diplomatic triumph. It was the foundation upon which true galactic civilization could finally be built.